you're doing fine. That's good. So this is the main device. It takes the camera feed. This is going to come.
Hi everyone.
The next panel.
I'll invite everyone to take their seats as we get ready to discuss the internet as a tool for development. Our panel is ready, seated up here. I trust the health break went well for everyone. And we're now ready to energize ourselves, refresh ourselves, and ready to get into our next bit of sessions. Well, I'll hand over the mic to Mr. Kris Senanu, who is the Deputy Chief Executive Officer for AccessKenya Group. AccessKenya does a lot of work related to the internet, ensuring rights and ensuring that all people, all players do what is within their responsibility to keep the internet safe and to ensure trust of people online as well. And of the panelists, we have Mr. Badru Ntege, who's the CEO. NFT Consult, we have Mr. Kenneth Bagarukayo, he's the Commissioner for Information Management Services at the Ministry of ICT in Uganda. We have Nelly Nalogo from AfriCell, Mr. Isaac Kasana, who is the CEO of the Research and EducationNetworj for Uganda, RENU. They're doing a lot of work helping universities get online to share information as well as collaborate. And Mr. Chege from ISOC Africa. Mr. Kris.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Good morning.
Wow, that was good morning.
Good morning.
Great, fantastic. I thought after the break, so since people had some tea, we'll have a bit more energy in the room. I want to promise you a few things. Anybody who's come with more than 6 slides, the good news is you're not going to even see the slides. This is going to be an interactive session. We're talking about the internet economy, how we can push development using the tool called the internet. And we've got a fantastic group of panelists who've just been introduced. My name is Kris Senanu. I actually am here today as the chairman of Kenneth, not as the deputy CEO for Internet Solutions East Africa. And the reason I stress that is because Kenneth has been at the forefront of internet governance and pushing for the internet society across East Africa. So welcome to this session, and let's make it very lively and interactive. So I'm going to pass on the mic to my panelists and allow them a minute and a half each to just make opening statements. Then we shall talk a little bit more in terms of interacting with each other on certain specific topics that I'll throw to the panelists. Thank you, Badru.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I think most of you know me. My name is Badru Ntege, and I've been in the sector for quite some time. When I was asked to talk about internet as a tool for development, I got involved in an interesting work some time back when we were doing a project for we were looking at how we increase the balance of trade as the dollar. Everybody knows what the dollar is doing. So the government put up a team to look at the balance of trade, and we looked at different areas. And we looked at what can we do in agriculture, what can we do in manufacturing, what can we do in all these different sectors. The interesting outcome when I looked at those reports is every discussion we had, IT had the smallest space in there. And when I looked at what the agricultural people were doing, it was interesting. It would have been the same thing that was being done 10 or 15 years ago. All the plans that we had did not actually have any. So that got me thinking a lot, and I started looking at what really can we do with agriculture. If I can quote something from the Food and Agriculture Organization, which predicts that global population will reach 8 billion people by 2025, and 9.6 billion people by 2050. In order to keep pace with food production must increase by 70%. So how do we increase our food production by 70%? And especially in spaces, in areas like ours where we really, the concept of commercial farming has not been there yet. When you look at the fertility of our land, and we all talk about the fertility of our land, but we're not utilizing it. So the question is, how do we now introduce the internet in that space. And we now start looking at what we need to do. And from the government point of view, we're saying government needs to have a complete paradigm shift. A lot of effort from government when it comes to the internet, they always talk about increasing bandwidth. Now, I think that's an old story. Government needs to step out of that. And we need to look at what else can we do with the internet? And also private sector. The thing that comes after that is regulation. Now, we've talked about the Internet of Things. Now, Internet of Things, we take that into agriculture, it means that we can start doing soil, different soil types, we can do climate change, we can do data analytics, we can start collecting data and actually start managing how we increase our production and productivity. Then also the next thing is how do we localize this technology so that the rural farmer has access to all this information that is available today. I think the traditional process that we're doing with NGOs, with all these outreach teams and all these 4x4s, that is like yesterday. How do we create applications that have all this information that we can disseminate en masse? That's the internet in terms of working development. The next question that comes is our friends at regulation. How will we handle the regulation of things? Because now we're going to the Internet of Things, right? The next thing is they want to regulate, but what are you going to regulate? They still need to regulate something. So we need to figure out and understand the balance between development and regulation, which means that the entire approach needs to be very different from our current approach today. And if you start looking at areas that we can do what we call smart farming, we're looking at big management, we're looking at tractors with GPS, we're looking at knowing what we've planted, when we've planted it, livestock monitoring, fish farm, the list continues, which for me the internet has not touched yet, at least in our area, and it should be there more than anything else. So the agenda for private sector and for business for government when it comes to the internet, we need to be looking at what do we do with the internet in agriculture. In terms of really bringing precision. There is another concept that we talked about also, when you look at global warming and the changes in terms of seasons, that has all changed. So another concept is introduction of what I like to call the third season. We start looking at now, how do we use solar, how do we use all the information that we've gathered over the time with the internet. There is, in terms of solar water pumping, so actually we increase that third season, we increase productivity. The concept for me is the options are plenty, the questions are plenty, but what I like most about this is it's something that we can achieve in the next 12 to 18 months if we put our minds to it. So private sector, government, and all the different players need to come together, a totally different paradigm shift in the approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Badru. That's a fantastic startup in terms of how we can use technology in agriculture or agribusiness. I guess that's smart agribusiness, isn't it? Great. Let's hear from maybe Kevin next, and then Kenneth, sorry.
Thank you very much. I'm Kenneth Bagarukayo from the Ministry of ICT. I'm also an enthusiast, internet user, etc. I'll speak a little bit about the other side of growing the internet. When I was asked to speak about ICT as a tool for development, I thought most of us in the room already know how this can be done. Yeah, Badru has already spoken about ICT for agriculture. Someone else would speak about education. Someone else would speak about etc. As governments, we have been in the business of trying to extend the reach of the internet initially. But one of the key challenges we have been caught up with is around the legislation, and that is what I'm going to talk about, legislation and regulation of the internet. First, let me describe a little bit our ICT sector in Uganda so that we as we discuss, we properly understand who is in charge of what. The sector is broken down in three broad parts, if I could call them that. Initially, we have the policy level, which is the topmost organ. The Ministry of ICT is in charge of the policy. Then the second tier is regulatory, which has our regulatory agencies like Uganda Communications Commission, and for certain parts still the National IT Authority. The last part is the operational, which we would like to be much driven by the private sector. So there you can already see our dilemma as it were. But we prefer that because the private sector all over the world has driven the internet, not just reach and access, but also research, development, innovation, etc. We have been playing a catch-up game as far as legislation is concerned, but we want the discussion to be around how we can move in tandem with the technology, not to regulate the things of the internet, as Badru has said, but to ensure that we put together policies and regulations which will benefit all of us, not just the business people, but also the society, as it were. So, so far, you already know the laws which we have put in place. We have cyber laws. We have the Data Privacy and Protection Act, which is soon to be passed. It's now at the highest tiers of government. But we are in the process of coming up with others and thinking about how best to regulate and ensure that the internet is a safe space for all Ugandans. So, as you can see, my presentation is mainly around questions. I want this to be an interactive session where we can all advise one another on how to do it better. But our role is to be the midfielder to ensure that the private sector, profit-driven as they are, play safe, first of all. Two, we ensure that the population is protected, not just men and women, but also children. We have a few initiatives in place where we are trying to protect our children online. So I wanted our discussion to center around that. I thank you. 1 minute and a half.
Thank you so much, Kenneth. I can see you've left some very good thoughts about it, that private sector, you don't want to regulate to stifle, you just want to regulate to give a facilitatory environment for the growth. Well, the next speaker, Isaac, is a veteran of this industry. Over 20 years, been doing many different things, I think starting from the visa technologies and the rest. Let's see what Isaac has to add to this fantastic conversation.
Thank you very much. Allow me to first share some words of appreciation, because the organization I work for is supported heavily by many players. My name is Isaac from Research and EducationNetworj for Uganda, RENU. And I want to start by appreciating the Ministry of ICT, Uganda Communications Commission, and a number of private sector PIP players for supporting RENU in accomplishing what we've so far accomplished for research and education, which is what we call academia. Without those people, I don't think we would be where we are. So we just want to put it on record that we appreciate their support. I really am going to give you a very brief synopsis, and then after that, I hope there will be time to discuss and then reach what I have stated. Let me start by making a statement of a salient fact, that research and education is one of the leading things driving the development agenda. And this is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Even in 500 BC, people knew education was critical. People knew finding out new drugs from trees and things like that, which was what research was like, was critical. People knew that discovering how to discourage the pests from destroying your agriculture was critical. So even today, that is still a key agenda of development. Having said that, the principal role of academia in the use of the internet for development is that main of trailblazing, setting the pace or going where people have not gone before, driving innovations in its use for supporting research and education, and driving all other development needs and innovations in the development of ICT itself. Later on when I get a chance, I'll illustrate how this has happened at least in Uganda and in Kenya and in Ethiopia. Then the other key contribution of academia is to serve as a catalyst that accelerates the transformation of both education, research, and development. Actually, those three are linked: research, education, and development. It's a catalyst in the sense that it happens faster when you allow academia to use internet and connectivity to accelerate it. And I'm glad to announce that the revolution in education, especially higher education, is already happening. Another vital contribution of academia is to drive growth of empowered users of the internet. When I say empowered, there are people who use the internet for not very productive application. The ones who are empowered are the type that Badru has described, who can see how it can impact agriculture, health, new jobs, that kind of thing. And that's one of the roles of academia, is to sort of grow, ensure growth of those people who are empowered. And as they do that, they actually grow the market so that the commercial people can have a wider market. And this has been proved actually in more advanced countries. The fourth contribution that I highlighted here is improving coverage and quality of higher education, while at the same time lowering the cost of access to higher education. And this is done through deeper sharing of resources, nationally, regionally, globally. This is actually happening. Really, if you focus on Uganda, you will know that we had a retrogression in equity for education. The northern part of the country and some other part of the country had setbacks. And the people from those areas have not had as much access or as fair access to education. And that's one of the key roles that the internet can help to address, that we reverse that retrogression so that we have a more equitable access to higher education. Then finally, the fifth point I want to highlight is the role of accelerating solution to human problems and catalyzing regional integration because of the collaboration that happens when people do that. And in fact, somebody used to joke that the internet society might integrate Africa before the political side does so. Because as people collaborate and do things together, they get connected and they develop communities of practice. That's why our tagline now is connectivity, collaboration, community. The three go together. So that's what I wanted to highlight. And then we can, if there's the opportunity, I can elaborate on some. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Isaac. The World Bank estimates that African economies are going to grow mostly by 5 to 6%. I guess that's after most of the elections we're going to have this year. But the interesting thing is that 10% of this GDP in these African countries is actually going to come from the internet. So the internet GDP is actually very high, very strong, and growing. And we all know that most of this cannot happen without infrastructural development. And for us in East Africa, I believe that a lot of the collaboration, cooperation, which is coming, is going to happen through connectivity. So you're very right that it's highly likely that ISOC will end up unifying Africa before our governments sit down to do the same. But moving on swiftly, I think we have a gentleman from BCS, Mr. Elijah, who can tell us what they're doing in terms of this infrastructural development and how we're going to be able to use the internet to actually move forward. Thank you, Elijah.
Thank you, Kris. Hi, everyone. When I was asked to participate on behalf of our MD Jonas about the role of internet to speak to people like, well, when I look around, I can see very enlightened people. I was a bit concerned because I can bet 99% of the people in this room know how essential internet is. I think what I would like to challenge everyone is, what are we doing about it? So, and when I asked that question, I posed the challenge to the government. I'm happy Kenneth is next to me. I posed the challenge to the telcos and ISPs who are players in the industry. I also posed the question to the OTTs. These are the Facebooks, the Googles, the people who provide content. Are we doing enough about it? But I think the most important question is to all of us in this room. What are we doing about it? We know the role that internet plays. What are we doing about it? As individuals, are we taking enough opportunities to seize the entrepreneurial opportunities that come with the internet? Are we being creative enough to start our own businesses? The narrative of saying the government should do or the government should provide should be the narrative of the past. It should be me and you asking ourselves, are we taking enough opportunities to create jobs, not just for yourselves, but also for our brothers and sisters? Having said that, I want to take full responsibility of that question. I would like to say what BCS is currently doing in East Africa to make sure that we serve the underserved. As BCS, so far we have 2,200 kilometers of fiber that we have built in East Africa. The objective is to connect more than 8 countries. When I say 8 is because I've added DRC into the East African community. I hope the government allows me to do that. But then, like Isaac said, internet is going to connect people before the government does it politically. So yes, we can bring on board DRC into East Africa through the internet. So what we are currently doing, out of the 2,200 kilometers of fiber that we currently have, 1,800 has been built in the last 10 months. Meaning BCS has continued to invest capital to make sure that we serve the underserved markets. 1,300 kilometers is in Uganda, then 550 kilometers is in northern Kenya. When I look around, I see people who come from Kenya. Kris Senanu is one of them. He wears different hats, but he's from Kenya. I can bet many people have never been to the northern part of Kenya. And maybe by a show of hands, how many people from Kenya here have been to Isiolo, for example? Wow. Okay, fast. How many of us have been to Marsabit? How many of us have been to Moyale? You see, the ratios keep going down. So you find almost 50% of Kenyans have never been to the northern part of Kenya. The northern part of Kenya is more than 50, geographically, it's more than 50% of the entire nation. So you find 50%, more than 50% of Kenyans have never been that side. In terms of population, that's high, considering that the most of the Kenyan population is not in the northern side. So as BCS, we partnered, like Isaac said, partnership is the only sustainable model in telecommunication because it involves a lot of capital to invest in fiber and all the network infrastructure. As telcos and players, we need to be partnering with ourselves instead of killing each other with competition. We need to collaborate more and more often. So we've currently built 550 kilometers in collaboration with Safaricom. The objective is to connect Ethiopia and Kenya, and also to serve the people in the northern side of Kenya. We currently also are planning to do another 500 kilometers in Uganda. The objective is to connect, for my friends based out of Uganda, is to connect Fort Portal and Masindi, and then to also connect Mbarara and Kagitumba. Mbarara and Kagitumba is the second border of Uganda and Rwanda. And currently, we are serving Rwanda from Gatuna border. We've also gone ahead and served Burundi at the Akanyaru border. We're also serving Eastern DRC at Gisenyi, and we serve South Sudan at Nimule. When you look at the kind of infrastructure that you're trying to penetrate, yes, you can think that we're wearing a commercial hat, but I think what is important is to look at the towns that we are going to. We are not doing a straight line from Kampala to Nimule. We are doing fiber that goes to where the people are, then you get to your destination. So that means there's a lot of cost, because as a business model, we do not serve retail market direct. We serve telecommunication companies who then go ahead and serve the retail market. So our objective is to try as much as possible to pull the telecom operators from serving the Kampala people to serving people in the rural areas so that we can reach as many people as possible. We also have projects that we planned ahead, and we are trying to pull many other players, including content providers, so that we can try as much as possible and reach the underserved. I would like to leave it there because I think I've exceeded my 1.5 minutes. Thank you.
Thanks, Elijah. And maybe we can have Kevin top it up from ISOC.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Kris, and good morning to you all. My name is Kevin Chege from the Deuty Society, and I'd like to thank the ISOC Uganda chapter for hosting us in this East Africa IGF, and to everyone who made this possible. So my title at Deuty Society is the Internet Development Manager. I will speak in my 1.5 minutes, though I was very ambitious and prepared some slides, but I'll leave it to the discretion of the chair to see if I'll be able to speak. So I hope most of you have heard of the Internet Society. We are a global organization, and our mission is to promote the open development and evolution of the Internet to be a tool to be used by everyone. Our vision is that the Internet is for everyone, and we've done a lot of work in Africa and across the world to promote the development of the Internet. Let me go through my 1.5 minute opening talk, then I'll leave it to the chair to decide. So, as the Internet Society, we do a lot to bring in all the stakeholders to promote the development of the Internet and to use the Internet in Africa. So we host a number of forums which you may have heard about, forums like the AFBIF Forum, which aims to bring together the governments, ISPs and IXPs in order to promote interconnection within Africa so that we can keep African connectivity and African Internet within Africa. What that means is if I'm here in Uganda and I want to visit a website in Rwanda or Kenya, that traffic should be exchanged over our borders and should not go to Europe or another part of the world. So that meeting, AFBIF, is one of the meetings where we talk about how we can improve interconnection between the different African countries and promote the policies behind that. We also have other events like the Africa DNS Forum. This is an event that brings in our CCTLDs, people like Kenneth and the other organizations that run at the top level domain names in the individual countries, so .ug.tz and so on. And the purpose of that is to have more people or to promote more registrations of domains within African CCTLDs. To give you an example, the total registrations in Africa right now are just 1.4 million domains in terms of top level domains. that is easily dwarfed by the other continents, which have hundreds of millions of domains registered. In fact, out of that 1.3 million domains registered, about 1 million are in South Africa alone. So there's a lot of work to improve our CCTLD so that more domains can be registered on the continent. So we do a number of other activities, but today I was brought here to talk about how ISOC is using internet as a tool for development. So over the years, ISOC has been running a number of capacity building activities with the aim of improving technical skills on the continent, because we believe if the internet is to be for everyone, the right people need to be trained in the right skills in order to manage the internet properly. I think most of you will know that you can have the best high-speed internet connection, but if you don't have a network administrator there with you or a system administrator there with you who knows how to manage that as a resource, it could easily end up getting abused and only used by a few people. So we have been running capacity building over the years, and we've taken in, we've been doing a number of offline trainings. This year we introduced an online training as we aim to use the internet to reach more engineers and improve the number of skills, or the number of people with skills on the continent who can manage the resources. And the reason we're doing that is we want more people to know how to manage the internet as a resource. We want high quality of internet services. High quality of internet services mean if you want to host a website on the continent, you should have the confidence that you can find someone who's been trained in the proper skills to manage that for you. So you shouldn't host your website outside of the continent. You should host it in your own home country, because that will improve the speed and access to your website, but also possibly improve someone's well-being in terms of you're able to hire someone to manage that for you, and that person can get a job locally rather than you exporting that job outside of the continent. So I'll make those brief remarks and stop there and hand over to my chair to see if I'll be allowed to speak through my slides very quickly.
If there's a particular slide you think we will die without seeing,
yes,
please put it up and talk through it.
Okay, let me do that very quickly.
Then after that, I'll open it up.
Okay, so I've talked about ISOC, and I'll give a quick background of why we're doing capacity building. So Africa greatly needs more hands-on, more technical people to manage the resources. As you all know, there's a lot of work going into the expanding the internet connectivity in Africa. So a few years back we were only on VSAT, but a number of countries right now are on high-speed fiber. To give you an example, the live stream that you're doing right now from Uganda right now is being done on high definition. This was something that would have not been possible just a few years back. So more people need to be trained in the right skills, which is why we're doing our capacity building. We've been doing it for a number of years, although the main sort of work under the Africa Regional Bureau where I'm based is started around 2008. And since then we've trained about 1,800 people, including those who've gone through network operator group trainings. So we focus on a particular course called Track Zero, which focuses on building basic skills on how to manage Unix services, in particular the domain name system, and also introduces people into networking and Unix and Linux. The reason we teach Unix and Linux is because most of the services that are run by ISPs, IXPs, any website you're visiting right now, there's a higher chance that it's running on an open source platform. So it's not that we are anti-proprietary, no, we're just teaching what is the most popular right now and what can be deployed very quickly. So that's just a chart showing the number of trainings or the number of people able to train over the years. So you can see it's roughly about 200 or 300 people per year, which for the continent was very low. So we thought of, we took the feedback from the people we've trained and asked them, okay, why do you like this course? What can be done to improve it? What are the things you'd like to see in another version of the course? So we took all this feedback and recommendations, and people said we want the courses to be more frequent. We want more time to go through the materials. We want the trainings to be more accessible, because what we were doing was taking the training to other countries. So for example, a trainer would come to Kampala and train for 5 days and then fly out. But that was not a very sustainable way to do the trainings. So we changed up our training outline, and we introduced an online component which you see there on the left. And we have a main course right now that's called Introduction to Network Operations. I apologize for going very quickly, but you'll get the gist of what I'm talking about. The Introduction to Network Operations course, it took 9 months to develop over 2014. We did a pilot run towards the end of 2014. We took trainees from across Africa who took the course at the same time. And we had people took the course from Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Swaziland, Ethiopia, Botswana, and so on. And that was important to do because we wanted to make sure that regardless of where you are on the continent, you can benefit from the course and you'll have a similar experience whether you're on a VSAT link or a copper link or a fiber link. So that's the mix we wanted to do. So I'm being asked to, okay, fine. So about the course, I've mentioned just talking about basics. The course is open to anyone, whether you're from an IXP, ISP, CCTLD. We are going to experiment with university students next month with the university in Kenya, see how they like it. But so far we've gotten very positive feedback, and we've streamlined the procedure right now. So we have a pre-application and then registration period, and then you take the online course, and then when you're done, you just complete a survey. The objectives are already talked about, and I won't go through offline versus online, but let me just stop and say that so far the feedback we've taken has been very positive. We've trained about 160, 200 people. We expect to train about 400 before the end of the year, which is double what we would do on a normal year with our offline trainings. To take the course is very easy. We want to translate it into French. Right now it's only in English, but plans are in place to translate it to French. So I'll stop there. I'll be around there for questions. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Kevin. It is very important to see how we are on the back end, or rather the bottom end, developing the internet, the technical skills or capabilities of our countries. That's very critical. So now, the interesting part. The internet is a tremendous and undisputed force of economic growth and social change. And my question then to the panelists today is, from a private sector point of view and a public sector point of view, what is it that we need to do in order to really get value from this tool? What should we start? What should we stop? What should we continue? We have the government on one side, which has to do the regulation to make sure it's a safe place. There have to be rules, but at the same time we have to grow because we know the internet economy is critical. So maybe let's pass the mic to Badru, and he can tell us a bit of what his thoughts are, because everybody over here is very endowed with knowledge. Badru.
Thank you. I'm not sure about the endowed with knowledge. Where should we start? Where should we go? I say start anywhere, go anywhere. Because we don't know where this tool called internet will take us. What we need to know is how we handle it. And it's really how we also bring inclusiveness in it. Because the internet in a small portion or access to a small section of the people will not actually value it. It's growth in numbers. And then that becomes that how do you do that equity growth, making sure that everybody has a fair share in terms of the growth, but also in terms of the knowledge. So the things that Kevin is talking about are good because it gives that knowledge share and it goes down. But at the end of the day, I don't think anybody in this room knows what's going to be the trending thing 6-8 months from now. Which is what I say, start anywhere, go anywhere, and just see where it takes us.
So, I mean, taking up from there, Isaac, maybe I would like to ask you, Badru talks about inclusiveness. Academia sometimes is always within the internet society, but sometimes is seen as in a corner by themselves doing their own things. From an academic point of view, or how do we bring inclusiveness in terms of the research you do, in terms of bringing that up to add value to development? Because at the end of the day, you can have the tools there, you can have the infrastructure there, but the person on the ground, how do we make sure that the Wanjikos, like we say in Kenya, actually feel the value of this internet?
Okay, there are really two areas which I think we need to address. But before I mention those, let me point out that when you feel that academia is not operating inclusively. It's your perception. And I'll explain this by a few examples. 20 years ago, when you got HIV, it was the death sentence. Today, it's treated long-term like diabetes and any other condition which is recurrent. And that could only happen because researchers on many different continents tackle this problem together. And there is no way they will do that without connectivity. So the beneficiaries are the last people on the ground who are now getting the medicine and all the other things which go with it. But the work was done actually by that group.
So it's a collaborative effort.
It's a collaborative, but also the results is a quick win from academics. Because really as we speak, there is the impact. I gave the example of HIV, but you can get one in Agri and many other things. So that's one. But I feel that part of the problem is that in Africa, we kind of are slow developing. For me, the area I see as priority is education because we have so many unreached people as far as education is concerned. And the cheapest way to do that is really the internet. But I don't think we are taking off in that direction. If we did, it would be totally inclusive.
Academia itself is downplaying the value of like an online degree. So the person in Masabe or Karamoja who goes online and takes a degree never gets to be treated the same as somebody who walks into a brick and mortar institution to get their certification. So how do we change that perception?
You're actually right on that. That's why I told you that it's the perception. You are right on that. And especially in this country, I don't know about other countries, but people have a negative attitude towards people who have not been in front of a lecture. But as I explained earlier, the revolution has started. We actually have already a virtual university in Uganda. They've graduated 29 graduates at postgraduate level. We have 5 universities forming a consortium to deliver online postgraduate education in Uganda. Now, I don't have the figures for Kenya and Tanzania, but I also know that there are 7 universities, 3 in Ethiopia, 2 in Uganda, and 2 in Tanzania, who are again coming together to start a completely new program called Technology for in East Africa, which is very applied. And without that connectivity, these universities will not be able to work together. And they actually, the way they are doing it, they are targeting the people. None of the universities are rural, so they are targeting agriculture, water supply, things which our people need.
So maybe let me move on to Ken. And from a government point of view, so Isaac is saying we need to leverage the internet for education, to educate our people, to develop the capacity so that we can build Africa. And which means that me studying to become a PhD, to become a lecturer, I might be getting myself ready for a job which does not exist in 5 years. But so tell me from a regulatory or government point of view, what do you see? What do you think we should start? What do you think we should stop? What do you think we should continue? So we can develop?
Thank you so much, Chair. From a government point of view, what we have seen right now is the more the internet is used, the more we leverage the benefits. And one of the key challenges we have seen thereby is, okay, it's not a challenge, but it's just an area which is still growing. We have seen this in television, we have seen this in radio, local content. As soon as our radios and televisions went local, broadcasting local content, having local discussions and the like, which can be beneficial to people regardless of their level of education. We have seen a growth in the uptake of the information. So what I see, and you heard the minister say earlier, represented by the PS, that one of our key challenges is cost. And the cost remains up because we are few users. It's like the egg and chicken. But I know if we develop local content, and as government we are coming up with some strategies and policies on how we can help the communities do this. But if we improve our local content and we improve our innovation, we shall be sure to see the usage shoot up, and then the price will come down. So in our various areas, whatever we do, let's try to promote not just government, but also academia and the private sector. The demand is out there. Many times tools like the social media tools and others have been beneficial for people to share local content. But I feel we still need a lot more development so that we also improve the local hosting and so on. All these will ensure that the cost goes down. Once the cost goes down and the usage is high, I bet the sky is the limit. Thank you.
So let me open up to the audience for questions, because I think it's important to take some questions now. But as we pass the mic, I don't know who, I can see some hands up in the middle. So you were saying it's economics. Increase the number of users, bring down the price, have more people connected, and so therefore, so we'll take one from the middle there. And so therefore, we will now develop the internet, develop the ecosystem basically that puts together the internet. Okay, let's take the question. Yes, Brian.
Thanks, Kris. My name is Brian from Kenya, but I've been in Uganda the past 2.5 years driving.
Now you're Ugandan?
I'm not yet Uganda.
This is East Africa.
Yeah, driving internet development in northern Uganda. I just wanted to make a very quick comment and then a couple of inputs for the panel to consider. The first comment that I'm making is on particularly this topic. It's not really so much for us as the audience to ask questions, because I don't believe that all the experts are up there. We also have a lot of expertise down here. So it should be interactive. I think that we'll be able to get a lot more probably out of the audience, so that you can, as the East African IGF, formulate good inputs that will go to the global scene. So really focusing on looking at internet as a tool for development, and just to speak to some of the points that have been raised there. I'm a bit disappointed because I had more of marketing coming from some of your panelists, as opposed to really challenging and addressing the question of internet as a tool for development. You know, how can we decentralize services to increase impact? ISOC, you talked about the training that you've been doing. Since 2008, you've trained about 1,800. It's not a bad number, but I wouldn't say it's something to be proud of, because you find local initiatives that are able to train much higher numbers because they are right there where the people live and work. I think it's important to think about decentralizing the training, doing more of training of trainers rather than training end users, and let go of that element of control. Empower ISOC Uganda so that they can be able to mobilize their members to become trainers that can train back in their communities of practice. That would really enlarge the results going forward. And I think that as a tool for development, capacity building is critical, but we have to do it right to be able to get as many people as possible. Our project in northern Uganda has been able to train 4,000 people over the past 1.5 years because of putting small centers right in the villages where these people live, and ensuring that we have a trainer there who is training people on a daily basis, or well, the training takes 7 weeks, but constantly training more and more groups. So let's try and get as much of the content, as much of the different things that we are doing close to the people in the communities where they live. Second point, and this one goes to Isaac. It's good to see you again after so many years, sir. But more so, it's a challenge to the private sector. And I think I sound like a broken record in forums like this because I'm always talking about stronger linkages between industry and academia. The linkages have been growing, the linkages have been there. I think there's a lot that has been done in countries like Kenya, where you see very strong partnerships between industry and academia on certain areas. But I think that there's still so much more that can be done, especially in terms of direct interventions between academia and the private sector in terms of designing, coming up with localized solutions. Most of our companies, and Kris being the CEO of a large internet group that is transforming the region, would probably agree with me on this. Most of our companies, private sector, we have product development budgets that are approved annually, quarterly, etc. However, what happens is the people who handle those budgets are so busy because they have targets to meet. that the tendency that they fall onto, and Badru, I know you're nodding your head because you've been in this space before. The tendency is that the people who are allocated those budgets within our companies are so busy meeting their targets, working to meet their targets, that they fall onto the easy option of looking to the West to find technology solutions that can be bought and brought in. Now, we have a challenge where, as private companies, we have the money, but we don't have the time. At the universities, there are people with a lot of time, but they don't have the money. Let's link those two together. Get the universities to start working out product development exercises. I'll give you 2 examples, which I know immediately will be able to have an impact in this region. And I'll close with this, Kris. I'm sorry I've talked too long. One of the things that we found as a big problem as we've been rolling out last mile networks especially in northern Uganda, is lightning arresters. There are no locally produced lightning arresters. All the lightning arresters that we buy have to come from the US, and they come at a significant cost. And even the ones that are coming from there, they know the American lightning, they don't know the African one. So they come here, and next thing you know, the thing lasts for 2-3 months, it falls apart, you know? And the network is down for a couple of days because you now have to scramble and look for a lightning arrester. How much time do you think it will take our universities if we put our engineers there, dismantle these things that we're importing, and design a more robust African one? How long do you think it will take them to produce that? You know? So let me not give the second example. Yes. I'll just stop there and hand over back to you. Thank you very much.
The African lightning is totally different from American one, I can tell you. Yes, let's take the second question, then we have one from the other side later. Or comment. And yes, you're right, Brian, not all the knowledge is on this side. Yeah.
My name is Ali Hussein. I'm coming from Nairobi. Mine is really about how to start mixing business initiatives like my good friend from BCS has talked about. Of course, apart from his 2-minute marketing gig, which is fine. Now, the thing about this is that we've always talked about infrastructure, we're always talking about how we need to improve and increase infrastructure, but we forget about the soft stuff. We forget about what it will take to have the right policies in place, what it will take for business to engage meaningfully with government and vice versa. You see, a Safaricom and a Airtel and a BCS will not go to Moyale if it doesn't make sense from a business perspective, period. Let's start from there. So how do you mix that? Now, to give you an analogy, is the internet is a highway. And I know maybe sometimes the big infrastructure service providers may not agree with me, but for me where I'm sitting is that if I want connectivity in Kilifi County, where I come from, and the minute I'm driving out of Nairobi, 10 kilometers from Nairobi, I have a problem. I don't have connectivity. I mean, I'll just give you an example in this room today. Half the time, Liquid Telecom connectivity is not working. I'm sorry, Liquid, whoever. But I mean, it's a fact. Let's deal with these issues, guys. You're fighting signals between Liquid and AfriCell. Let's deal with those issues. But those issues are soft discussion that we must have. Electricity is another thing. So you're taking internet to Moyale. When the guys in Moyale, when you start putting up electricity poles, they start wondering, what the hell is that? They've never seen an electricity pole. Let's deal with those issues.
Okay.
Lastly, the issue of universal access funds.
Yes.
I think for some of you who possibly follow Internet, you know that I've been very consistent in that particular issue. We must mix business and social effects. The internet cannot be purely for business. Internet connectivity cannot be purely for business. We must have that. Otherwise, we will continue having people. We are talking about connectivity now hitting 100% in some countries, and yet in some countries, people have never seen internet. There are some countries today who have less than 10% penetration. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Maybe I can see a lady. We have to be balanced, and we'll need to wrap up soon. So, sorry. Yes, there was supposed to be a lady on the panel. I think she abrogated her constitutional right. Yes.
Thank you. One lady would not have been enough for a 2/3 gender rule, but that aside, my question is about holistic development, where which is still more or less like multi-stakeholderism, because in all the presentations, maybe it's because you were rushed, but I would have been interested to know about the user, the end user, how you incorporating the end user in this whole debate about using the internet for development. And all these examples that were given, one would wonder, for example, if you're talking about agriculture in the rural areas, who does most of this agriculture? It's women. So would you perhaps like to ask them what are their needs so that you respond to their needs, as opposed to the bottom approach? And my last question to ISOC is, what is the impact of your capacity building? Because I'm also a beneficiary of ISOC capacity building in one way or the other, but sometimes I also wonder what is the impact of all the people that have been trained by ISOC. Has it been useful in all the internet governance debates that are going on, or has it been something that you do and leave?
Great, thank you. We'll take the last question from the side, then I'll keep the mic on this side to ISOC and Badru to answer the specific question or comment.
Hi, Andrew from Liquid Telecom. Don't worry, I won't talk about Kenneth. In a past life, I was Chief Technology Officer for the South African Academic Network. And I want to talk a little bit about volumes of scale here, and I want to give you a comment as well about partnership with industry. Firstly, we talk about enhancing internet usage. If you give the capacity to people at the right price, it will get used. Here's an example where a university in South Africa was running on a 6 megabit link. We took that university when I was with Kenneth and we gave them a 10 gig fiber. And we took the limits off. It took them less than 24 hours to be running at a sustained 0.5 gigabit a second. Less than 24 hours. If you give the capacity, it will come. But the other thing is with regards to the partnerships between the academic sector and the commercial sector. Let's face it, the internet is a product of academia. That's where it came out of. That's still the highest usage. No one uses more bandwidth than academia, or no one. There's a telescope in South Africa that happily uses 4 gigabit a second, sending white noise to the Netherlands so that they can overlay it with other white noise and come out with a 10 meg image. That partnership can be very lucrative to commercial providers while at the same time doing a lot of good with academia if explored correctly. And this is one of the things that I found so effective in South Africa was those partnerships. When we were building the Tenet network back then, we went out on RFP and we said we want this new network. We had one set of providers that wanted to work with the status quo and one set of providers that wanted to actually work with academia, to the point where one of the providers who actually ended up being the winning bidder turned around and said, "You're going to outgrow us. So here's a name and number of our competition who can help you when you do outgrow us." That alone bought them so much brownie points that they got the deal. And that partnership allowed the cost of bandwidth to come down to the point where we managed to take the bandwidth through proper partnerships from over $1,000 a meg to under $100 a meg within the space of one tender and 1 month. So those partnerships really are critical.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I'll pass the mic to Badru.
Thank you. I'm trying to rush in because I'm rushing out. I just want to respond to the agriculture, the comment. You're very right, and I think also Alita touched about it. The users are the most important in this chain, especially if you're going to bottom up at the end, which is why we're seriously talking about localization. And when we say localization, we don't just stop at saying, a few years back when you talked about literacy, you talked about the ability to speak English. But that's no longer an issue anymore, because literacy is not important to speak English as long as you can actually get the information you need. The localization side we're also looking at, and we should be talking about it, is, and I mentioned it, is localization of these devices. That the people in the villages are picking up this device and it's speaking Luo, it's speaking Kinyarwanda, it's speaking Uganda on the outset. And then we as the developers, we start developing applications at that level. And I think on the demand side, if it's there, I think as Andrew said, if the devices are there in the local languages, they will be used, and then the rest will come. Today, the market for these things has got to an artificial ceiling because it's touched most English speakers. We need to break that barrier and move forward. At the end of the day, really that's what it is. My point at pointing at agriculture was back to the other point of start anywhere, go everywhere. We haven't touched anything in terms of using the internet as a tool of development. We could do the same thing in any other sector, and you'll see that we've not gone anywhere, and we just need to open our minds and go wider.
Thank you for that, Badru. Yeah.
I would like to respond to the issue of lowering the internet cost to increase penetration and also to help the person on the ground access the internet and then optimize on the internet. You find, in most cases, you'll find that the cost of the internet, other than the capital that most of the telecommunication companies sunk in, on a day-to-day basis, the marginal cost, like if you're using an additional 1 MB, that incremental cost is not necessarily that high, other than the historical cost of capital. If through partnership we can find a way of reducing this cost of capital, then you'll be helping the end user access this internet at a very, very low cost. There's a project in one of the East African countries where, and this is not marketing early, through BCS, we are trying to work with the government to have every home, every institution, every government office, any place that has an electricity pole has internet. Getting to those homes, whether it's in the rural areas, as long as the government has done their part and they have put electricity poles, we are going to provide fiber into all those homes at no cost to the government. This initiative, for this to happen, you actually need to collaborate and look for partners so that you remove the business hat, so that you're going in with a social hat ahead of you. You talked of, we need to combine business and the social impact to the society. So for this to happen, then you have to go out there, look out for, even if it's donor funding. I believe most business leaders in this room have a lot of access to donor funding out there. We should be the ones driving the business case so that the donors can feel the need to fund some of these initiatives. So it's a challenge to all of us. The other one is the issue to do with taking full advantage of the internet. I think it was raised by the good lady. I feel as in Kenya and even in Rwanda, I've seen the iHubs and sort of the incubation. One of the things that I'll probably challenge the drivers of the incubators is if we can try a way of not just teaching the technical people how to develop apps that can solve social problems. If we can go further and focus on entrepreneurial, because I've interacted with incubators in the region, and you find that there's a small cake mentality amongst the engineers. The incubators being driven by technical guys. So you find an engineer want to own 100% of the company because it was his idea. But then that puts you in a rat race, because if you don't let go and you invite skills from other sectors, skills from an accountant, skills from a sales guy, that business case does not develop into a bigger cake. So you end up owning 100% of, allow me to do this, 100% of a kiosk, while you would have owned 1% of a Safaricom, for example. So I think this is a challenge, and to all of us as entrepreneurs, to all of us as people who are thinking of starting businesses, open up, remove this small cake mentality. Remove this box that people say, let's think outside the box. Why should there be a box in the first place? So go out there, think of innovative ways of driving business. Go to the rural women, talk to them. They have a solution to their problem. But don't prescribe. Sit with them. They will speak in vernacular. But you go out there, come up with a solution that addresses their specific needs. Then after that, then you will be growing an institution that can live beyond your life. So it's a challenge to all of us, and I don't think it's something that the government needs to prescribe. It's something that we should take up as a challenge. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you've done your wrap-up for today. Maybe Ken, tell us, I think we're now down to wrapping up. And yes, Kevin, you have to answer to the ISOC question also. So maybe Kevin answer first, and then let's do the wrap-up this way. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So I'll just answer a few of the questions that were addressed to ISOC. So I think the first one was from Brian in terms of the structure of the training. So ISOC is not alone in the field of trainings. We're not really the owners of the training. What we do is we work with partners on the continent so that it can also be owned locally. And to that effect, over the past 3 years, ISOC has supported the development of 4 network operator groups across Africa. Now, network operator groups, or nodes as they are known in other fields, they do help in terms of increasing the number of people who can be trained per year, and by people who are in the country, rather than flying someone who would come and train. The model that has been there that we had was that someone would be paid, a consultant, to fly in and then actually do the trainings. But that's a very difficult model to scale. So what we've been trying to do is encourage the development of more network operator groups. We do work with partners on the continent like AFNOG and all the other nodes that come up, and also the NSRC. With this new model of the online course, what we've done is we're now enabling a local person who can take over as a moderator, so that a training can be done not by someone who's flown in from another country, but rather someone who's developed the skills, someone trained them, and they can now moderate for another group of people in their countries. That's the model that we have right now. So, for example, if, just to give an example here, we had a training group from RENU, Research Education Networj of Uganda, and the training was done, I think, for 20-30 people. And one of the people who was moderating was actually from RENU. So previously, that would have been someone who's been flown in to come and train them for 1 week or 2 weeks. So we've tried to bring in the local aspect and improve more local ownership. So it's not a matter of flying in skills. The skills are there locally, it's just a matter of helping them out. Another thing that we do well as ISOC is work with all the stakeholders. We've also identified that women engineers are also coming up, and they're trying to build their skills and also trying to be involved in technology. So as ISOC, we work with a number of women groups. One in particular is AFCHICS, which is related to the African Network Operator Groups, and African Network Operator Group. And we have trained, we support their workshops and also allow them to use the online platform as well. in terms of the impacts, what's been the impact of the trainings, to answer the question about what's been the impact of the trainings? So our trainings are designed, this one I'm talking about in particular, is to improve the technical skills. So what we did is ask the past trainees who've gone through the workshop, did this training actually help you, or what was the impact? And I don't have the slide there, but perhaps I can read out some of the figures. So one of the questions was, okay, would you recommend the training to another person? 95% of the people said yes. Did the training have a positive impact on your personal or professional life? More than 80 people agreed or somewhat agreed. Then we asked them, were you able to apply the skills and knowledge gained on the training on the job? And about more than 80% of the people agreed. So we know that the trainings that we're doing, they are having a positive impact. And the more people that come to be trained, the more the services are going to improve. Let me just go back briefly to my previous life as a network administrator in a research education network. So I was a system admin in NREN, and it was 2009, and Kenya was only on VSAT, and 1 megabit of bandwidth was $3,000. And most universities at the time had 3 or 4 MBs at most. So undersea capacity lands in 2009, July. We have people who are on 3 megabits of satellite capacity. All of a sudden they have 50 MB of fiber. But when you look at the graphs, there's no usage. Why? Because the networks have not been optimized to run at the speeds. People are used to the VSAT speeds. The person on the ground, the network administrator, doesn't know what to do because he doesn't know how to optimize his network to take advantage of this resource that's just coming, the improved resource that's just coming. So with this in mind, it's important to take the aspect that as more and more of capacity is coming onto the continent, more people like my friend here from BCS and Liquid and so on, people need to be on the ground to be able to manage this resource. And as ISOC, what we're doing is we're doing the capacity building. We're also doing the forums where we're trying to bring people to discuss more about how can we have more interconnectivity between Kenya and Uganda. What can be done so that if I have a website that's in South Africa, I can access it with the same speed as I would something that's within the continent rather than leave the continent. I think with all that in mind, and there's a Chinese saying that say, if you build the road, the people will come. So a lot of the people are building the roads here, our ISPs and so on. So it's for us to bring in all the other stakeholders, get the policies right, get the costs right. As this comes down, I think more and more people will come to use the internet, and from that we'll see a lot of the innovation hubs that we're seeing in East Africa in particular, and a lot of access and a lot of clever applications that are coming up. So I think there's a bright future for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, just to wrap up, there are no particular questions for government, just maybe around the multi-stakeholderism, what it's called, but it's a new word. Yeah, but for most of the initiatives we are coming up with, we are trying to ensure that all the stakeholders are involved. A few examples I can name right now is like our country CCTLD, which we are working on. Stakeholder body, all the laws, policies we are coming up with. As I said earlier, we are trying not to stifle innovation, not to stifle investment from the private sector. So we, as much as possible, involve the private sector, academia, and all other stakeholders whenever we're coming up with these policies and laws, so that it's a win-win situation. Because as government, we are trying to protect the wananchi and also to protect the businesses, not just the businesses against each other, but also the businesses versus the population. Because you know, when businesses benefit, governments benefit because they collect taxes from the businesses. But again, governments have a social responsibility to the local citizen, not just those who have access to the information, but even those who don't. So the governments, and not just the Ugandan one, but I believe all the ones in the region, because again, we have similar initiatives within our East African community, within the Northern Corridor and others. We are trying to ensure that we make it as easy as possible for the internet to be accessed as cheap as possible. Some of the initiatives, for example, we are coming up with is the bulk purchase of the internet. Some of the countries are already doing it, but we want to even do it at a regional level. We have seen the price drop in Uganda from the ranges of about 700 to 800 per megabit. I think it's about 200 now, or 300, about 300 to 400 range. Although we know we can pull it down up to 60. But again, my earlier point is it's around the usage. How many of us are using it? Thanks to the RENUs and others who have managed to put their hands together. So it's a unity thing. Let's always come up whenever we are called upon to contribute to policy, to contribute to the discussion. I thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll do a quick wrap up. Let me first of all think to the question, what are we doing about it? And I just want to reflect this challenge to all of us in this room. Innovation is not a preserve of academia. And I'll give you an example, which is from academia, but which anybody in this room could have done. One of our members decided to develop programs to teach local artisans, garages, carpenters, people like that, how to run their businesses better. They got some funding from a partner in Europe. And over a number of years, they observed the transformation of those people's business. By teaching them in a local language, what's the difference between the business's money and their own money. And the change is phenomenal, to the extent that this pub received support to actually set up an incubation hub to address that need. So really, that could have been done, not necessarily in the university. Okay, the university may be interested in the academic part, which is to see the impact and how long and what difference. But really, anybody could have started that. So I'm throwing the challenge to all of us that let's put on our innovation hats. Then secondly, I just want to re-emphasize the importance of partnership. I mentioned it. I thank the people who have supported the research network, but it's so critical for us to move forward as Africa. Because development is a big animal. It's like, this building we're in, by the way, is a huge building. And there is no way you could support the weight of this building without many, many columns, huge columns, which are interconnected. So we cannot effect development unless we work together. And that's one of the things which I feel is a struggle. It's very difficult to get people to understand cooperation, even in academia. So my appeal to us again is let's learn to do things together, because we'll do it faster, and we have examples of where we've succeeded. I thank you.
Thank you, Isaac, for that too. So I guess we've heard a lot in this session. I tried to keep it short, but it's still overrun a bit. But I think to wrap up, the main themes that I seem to have picked up is we have to localize technology to create value. We have to collaborate. Different organizations and sectors will bring in the different pillars that will support the structure in the multi-stakeholder period we are in. We need to do capacity development. ISOC is going to keep on taking the lead on that. And Africa should take up the mantle to use technology for education, which is critical. And governments should stop playing catch-up and start collaborating through PPPs to protect both Wananchi and to protect business in terms of giving it an environment for growth. And lastly, but not the least, if we build the roads, the people will come. And more importantly, that the African lightning is not the same as the one from America. Thank you and enjoy your lunch. Please give a warm hand to the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Kris, and the panel for a very powerful, insightful session. And like he said, lunch is ready. But as we go for lunch, we've heard today that the Chege society has the power or the potential to integrate Africa more than the politicians. So as we go for lunch, let's interact with each other, share ideas that we can use to change our internet space. For lunch, there's a lady at the entrance. She has a coupon. Please book a coupon from her, and then the lunch will be in the restaurant downstairs. We should be back here by 2 p.m. Thank you so much for the meeting.